Okay, live stream offline. It should come on. Starting stream health. It's always weird. I wish it gave you like a countdown so that you could see like 3, 2, 1. You're on.
Yeah, Facebook does that. I wish, Facebook's like ahead on that. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, YouTube is still working on their live streaming stuff. Maybe they'll get there. All right, so we are now live. There are a grand total of 0 people watching. That should change hopefully pretty soon.
hey, and it popped up so I can see it now.
Good, good, good. Okay, so let's see. So I've got the screen up. Welcome, 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 everybody. Here, we'll start as if we just turned it on live. You ready? Okay.
There we go.
All right, now we're live. All right, welcome, everybody, to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and we are doing another live stream. Today, we have Mr. Tom Lawrence from Lawrence Systems. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know Tom or Tom's channel, I've got his website up on my screen here. Actually, I think I had your channel up somewhere. Anyways, I've got Tom's channel linked down below. Oh, here we go. Now some people are starting to pop in. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. But Tom has I guess you would qualify yourself as an MSP or...
Yeah, MSP, and we do break fix. So we're a technology solution provider with a focus on mostly small businesses.
Yeah. So Tom works out of Detroit, but more importantly, he has a YouTube channel. I don't know if that's more important, and more important to me since I'm nowhere near Detroit. and I started following Tom probably at least a year and a half ago. And he puts out really, really great content on his channel related to not only how he runs his business, which you've had for, 13, 14 years now?
Yeah, since 2003. So this is my 14th year in business.
Yeah, so how to run a successful business type of stuff in the IT world, as well as a lot of videos on open source technology.
Yeah, I've been following you for probably about the same because we got into Unify a while ago, and then I'm like, I wonder if there's some YouTube videos on this, and you were right at the top of that list, and so I started watching all the Unify videos, and same thing, you got a lot of great content on there.
Yes, thank you. I would say that if you contrast our channels, I think my content is a little bit more niche in the free PBX and Ubiquity world, and you're a little bit more broad in terms of the topics that you cover.
Yeah.
By the way, everyone's saying that Tom was a little too loud on the mic. I have adjusted him in OBS. I turned his volume down, so that should be good now. You guys let us know if the audio's still a little out of whack. Okay.
All right, we'll do a check real quick.
Yeah.
Is my mic in check?
Mic check. The funny thing is, too, there's about a 15-second delay. So when I make a change, it's always like, all right, did that work? And then pause. Oh, thank you, Alex. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So hang on, let me switch to a different view here because I was going to. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so now you guys should be able to see the chat as well. Are you watching the chat, Tom?
Yep, I'm actually watching the chat real time.
Okay, it's better now, but still a bit loud. Closer mic for me. All right. Thanks, guys. We could just spend 2 hours doing this. Let's dial in our audio perfectly. Closer mic for me. I'm going to turn Tom down just a tad bit more.
I also moved back just a little bit.
Yes. Okay. I think we're probably good. Tom and I are IT professionals. We are not audio engineers, so.
No, that's not my thing.
Definitely not. So the purpose of this, yes, Alex, we are taking a request for this video. So the purpose of this live stream is basically to, of course, give Tom some introduction here. I personally very much enjoy your content, so I'm happy to have you on, and I know that you're a wealth of knowledge about a lot of things. One of the things that I would like to discuss is Freenas, so we will probably get to that in a little bit. However, before we get to that, and also something that you're an expert on is running an IT business, right? So that's something that if you guys, I don't know who Tim is, but someone just said Tim is the man. No,
yeah.
But so
is it Tim or Tom? Which is it?
So basically, if you guys have questions about running an IT business or running an MSP or how to get started at that sort of thing. Certainly both Tom and myself. Tom has 14 years experience in his business. I have 3 running this business. So his wealth of knowledge is a little bit greater than mine, but we're happy to answer questions about that because it's true. Like even when I was in the the corporate world, right, where I was an actual working for the man, so to speak, I always had side customers that I would help out. Mostly it was just people in my local community that I respected, and like I wanted to actually give them IT help because I saw that they were struggling with something. They had a cruddy website or their network was terrible or whatever the case was. I did a lot of work on the side. And then ultimately when I switched into an independent contractor or, started my own business, having that sort of handful of customers on the side really helped jumpstart, the business, so to speak, because I could focus a lot on those customers and just reach out to them and say, hey, listen, I'm independent now. Anything you need, contact me. And I think that's probably a decent way to get started.
Absolutely. I started out with some customers kind of randomly like that too. I worked in corporate, but I had some leads because I worked for a series of small businesses, small mom and pop computer shops. And that kind of quickly led into, right away, you're like, well, the shop doesn't do it at all, or you just know everybody. And everyone's like, oh, you're the guy who fixed computers, especially because I started out in 1994.
Yeah.
So nobody knew anything back then.
That's the year I graduated high school.
Oh yeah, it's me too. That was same year.
Oh,
I
right,
was
cool.
doing it right. That's I joke around that I'm kind of a one-trick pony because I've been doing this like kind of since 1994. I delivered pizzas at night and I worked at a computer store when I wasn't delivering pizzas.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, that's the same thing. I mean, look, that's sort of the tenet of a hard worker is having the multiple jobs and using your time to bring in the money. When I was getting started, when I was 18, 19 years old and get my first jobs in tech, I would work tech all day, and then I was a waiter at night at a local Red Robin. So yeah, it's funny too because that Red Robin was where a lot of the people that I worked with would hang out after work. So sometimes I would get off of work, go straight to my shift at the Red Robin, and then wait on the people that I worked with all day. So that was always fun.
Yeah, I would deliver. It's like delivering pizzas like that. They're like, weren't you the one I dropped my computer off with? I'm like, yeah, I think I did that. So
probably. Would you like RAM with your pizza?
Yeah, pizza delivery was a good paying job back then.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. It's probably still a good paying job.
Alex, I was distracted for a second as I was throwing a few links out there. There's a couple Facebook groups I belong to, and I threw our stream into there. IT groups.
Oh, cool.
There's actually been some usefulness on Facebook for that. Most time Facebook's not the most useful, but I've actually found some IT groups that are private that are good.
Yeah. So if you guys do, so Alex says, Tom, I think you should talk Chris into switching into Pfsense. So Pfsense is a platform that I'm definitely interested in. We have done a couple videos on my channel on Pfsense. I'm not as Pfsense literate as Tom is. So if you guys do have Pfsense questions, that's another good topic for Tom. I know you've done a ton of Pfsense stuff on your channel, and you are a fan of the little, like the micro appliances and stuff?
Yeah, I like the micro appliances. I've tested those, and they seem to work really well. Because sometimes what people are asking for is going, hey, I'm looking for a slightly less expensive alternative. I want to run Pfsense. The Netgate products are a little bit cross-prohibitive. And Netgate has kind of tried to fill in the gap by offering their little, I think it's called the SG-1000, the little $149 one. My reviews are kind of mixed on it because it's not super powerful. You can't even use all the Pfsense features on it. And me and the Netgate people kind of went back and forth because they had not really advertised features, but there was just Pfsense features that just didn't work in it. And because of the firmware they were shipping it with. And it didn't really say that when I bought it. So my review of it was like, wow, this thing is slow and missing features. And then they said, well, try it now. There's a new firmware update for it. I'm like, well, thank you, but you shipped it to me with a different firmware.
Right.
But another advantage of Pfsense is commodity hardware is really, really inexpensive out there. So you could say, man, I can go buy, and we've done this ourselves for people that wanted Pfsense. They've come to the store, people I meet because I belong to Linux users groups, and they're like, I need a Pfsense box. I'm like, I got these for $49. Here's the old computer, just a couple nicks in it, and away you go.
Yeah, I was actually going to try to install it on this. I've got this little, let me pull this thing out of here, my little PB Exact, free PBX phone system 40. Hang on, let me pull this out. This would be like a great little Pfsense box. Yeah, look at this thing. So this little guy, I've got 4 NICs in the back. VGA, this is everything you'd need. It's got an SSD inside. And I was going to just pull out the hard drive and put a different drive and try to install Pfsense and get it working. I actually tried to install Freenas on this yesterday. It didn't work.
It looks just like, or at least spec very similar to the Project Tele ones that I've done reviews on them. They're pretty slick.
Yeah. That, Alex, that is the phone system 40, the Sangoma phone system 40. You can see it. Look at that. I've done a video.
What does that box cost?
This is
roughly
$695 MSRP. I actually charge a little bit less than that when I sell it.
Okay. Yeah, the Protect Tele boxes are generally in a few $100 range.
Yeah. Yeah, these things are pretty cool. I actually like these a lot for free PBX customers.
Well, something interesting, and I haven't seen no one mention this yet, but I did another video just on the fact that the new version of Pfsense is going to require the AES encryption built into the processors. And so because a lot of people built this on commodity hardware that didn't have that in there, they're going to have to switch within, it's going to be a couple of years before this version's out. But, you know, people like to think ahead, I guess, or maybe just want to get mad about this. They're going to be dropping support for processors that don't have it. And the earlier Protect Tele boxes didn't ship with that. So because they're missing that AES coprocessor, essentially, which is so you can do AES in the chip instead of using the standard processing power for it, they're not going to support the new 2.5 series of Pfsense.
Oh, wow.
But we are getting ahead. We're still on 2.3 of Pfsense. 2.4 is coming in, isn't even released yet. So this is a planned release for the 2.5, and the developers are just giving you a couple of years heads up that you may have to replace your hardware in a couple of years.
Right. Well, it's kind of nice that they do that at least. Yeah.
And someone said it's only to sell their products, and I don't think so. I mean, granted, all the Netgear products do have it, but the reality of it is delegating everything off to AES kind of removes the vulnerability of running a software AES in there, because there's been some side channel attacks people come up with. So, you put in you use it on the chip hardware. It's a proven technology. It's secure. It offloads some of the CPU power over to it. Away you go.
Someone asked, will Pfsense be coming to the Edge Router Lite hardware? And I don't know the answer to that question. However, Ubiquiti hired one of the lead developers of Pfsense, who is now running the Edge Router line. So I don't know.
That's interesting.
I imagine that some features will bleed in, which is probably a good thing. It's always good to get some extra functionality, and certainly Pfsense is a solid platform.
I think something that'd be interesting too is Pfsense is nice interface, but I got to admit, Unify's interface is gorgeous. They are really top notch on that.
Yeah, both sides, Unify and the Edge Router stuff. They're both decent interfaces for sure.
I see someone said Pfsense is x86, but they do have Pfsense for ARM now.
Oh, do they?
Uh-huh.
Someone was also asking about Mikrotik. Have you ever worked with those?
I have not.
I did one Mikrotik install, and I did a Mikrotik video, and it was a very popular video on the channel. But interestingly enough, or not interestingly enough, I think I've talked about this before. The problem that I have with Mikrotik is the model number naming scheme. It's such a huge learning curve just to get into like what models you need or what models you're looking for. They're good, cheap, solid products, it seems, but man, it's a steep learning curve to get into that thing.
I've always been, one of my things is really, and I'm looking at the Mikrotik, I've seen them before. They're not open source, are they?
No, they're not open source. Their aesthetics need a little bit of improvement too, I think.
There was a great article, write up on Reddit of how a company got hacked, and they weren't really clear on which router they were using for the firewalls or which firewall system they're using. But one of the things that was really interesting was it all came because they didn't have many people that understood the firewall system they were doing. So it was hard for someone else to audit when a rule change was made, and a bad rule compromised a large company.
Oh, wow. Well, that can happen.
Yeah, so I've always been, if the rules aren't clear, like I've always despised the way SonicWall has some, like you have to jump around, and especially the older SonicWalls are really confusing, and like you got to make sure you're closing all the ports or setting them all up rightly. And these complicated rule sets we have for multi-site companies, I want to be able to easily have some over there. The way Pfsense displays them, I've always found really simple.
Yeah.
And I can look in one page and go, there's my rules, here's what's open, here's what's closed. I didn't miss anything. Great.
SonicWalls are probably my... Yeah, Mikrotik did scare me. You're right. SonicWalls are probably my least favorite firewall, but that's because I'm coming from the VoIP world, and VoIP and SonicWall don't get along very well. So it's always been like the bane of my existence is people that have SonicWall firewalls, and they're actually a lot better than they used to be now. But for a long time, they were just straight up incompatible with voice over IP.
Yeah, they have a lot of weird issues with that. I mean, some of my earlier days of VoIP, I remember those being a challenge. And at the time, it wasn't Pfsense. I was using what would have been IP cop. That would have been in the early 2000s to solve problems with early VoIP systems.
Yeah.
They just didn't have any type of proper SIP handling.
Huh. Someone asked, Chris and Tom, can you name your favorite firewall and the reasons for choosing it? So for me... See, I don't have a favorite. I have a favorite based on my customer's needs. So, like, if a customer comes to me with a certain size organization, if they come to me with a certain, like if they have technical staff on hand or if they don't have technical staff on hand, my favorite firewall changes based on each individual customer environment. Also, it's nice to say, yeah, my favorite firewall is the edge router, but when you have a client that might have needs for, like, content filtering and IPS and the extra bells and whistles that some of these other firewalls have, and I think like stuff that you can install as plugins on Pfsense, when you come to that sort of stuff, ubiquity falls flat. So my favorite firewall, personally, I like the Edge Router Lite. That's what I run in my home office here. But for my customers, it 100% is a case-by-case basis.
That's a little bit for us too. We do install Unify routers on some of the more basic clients. Like you said, if they don't need IDS, they don't need lots of bells and whistles. It's kind of like a little 4-person, 5-person office, which does represent a lot of our clients. That edge routers, they work great for that.
Yep.
Even for some of the bigger clients, if they don't have any real specific needs, because VPN is not simple on the Unify equipment, at least not been my experience.
It's VPN on Unify equipment is simple if you are connecting to other Unify equipment and if everything is on the same cloud key. But in order to do that, it has to be sort of planned, deployed that way, right? So if you have to kind of replace multi-locations with all USGs or USG Pros in order for it to really work well.
Yeah, and for us, most of our VPN installs are, as you referred to, the RoadWarrior. The RoadWarrior VPN is in, all the employees are just connecting in remotely, and that's one of the reasons I love Pfsense, the deployment tool. And I don't know if I did a video, or maybe I did. I know I've done it in my long Pfsense video. I don't know if I've done a specific video. You can deploy VPNs in minutes with the Pfsense system to like a Windows computer with the certificate install, everything. You actually it actually spins up a file for them that has all the certificates, all the settings, and everything. You just have them double-click next and yesterday into a VPN working.
Huh.
And it's really nice for deployment. So once you configure the Pfsense box, it'll build the file, and you can do really high-level security because you can do like per user certificates. So you can do revocation, not just at the username level, but you can revoke the certificate to that user.
Oh, interesting.
Huh. Yeah, so Pfsense is really nice that it offers so much, depth in configuring that.
Right.
Like I said, maybe I'll do some more videos specifically on that. That's one of the reasons I've always liked it. So I seen someone else had a question. This question comes up constantly, and I'm not a fan of doing this, but people ask, how do you do the filtering at the firewall level, like with the UTM? Well, the problem is any of the UTMs you have to add a certificate, so you build trust between each device and the UTM firewall that's going to filter it. The problem with that is some things don't like it. Some things that use certificate pinning break. Other problems you run into is the fact that you have to maintain the certificates between the UTM and the devices. It also creates a potential for vulnerability between them if there's a compromise in the UTM. We prefer like end level protection, so we put protection on every individual system for filtering. We do that for our managed services, so we don't install a certificate on a Pfsense. We'll put a Pfsense and set up some blocking. Then we're going to do filtering at web filtering on every single workstation with a tool that we load directly on there to filter.
What tool do you use?
It's all part of our SolarWinds for MSP is a tool we use.
Sure.
So it's all part of our SolarWinds package. Their backend, I can't remember the company they use to build their tables from. It's an internal product they use. It's like part of the SolarWinds MSP package, but the tables themselves are built off of, I think it's some of the webroot filtering tables.
I like SolarWinds. I've always been a fan of theirs. As far as like when I was in charge of larger networks and stuff, they always made really good tools, and I appreciate companies that focus on functionality and design. Where it's not just like an ugly piece of junk, that kind of works well. That it's a pretty piece of junk that works well, right? So it's that's kind of like I've always liked them for that, and the fact that they give away some free tools. They have like the TFTP server and all the a few other free tools that they just give away straight up to everyone.
They kind of went on a buying rampage and they bought all the companies I liked, which is awesome because they actually they bought GFI, and so we're actually using specifically, it's called the SolarWinds GFI, and they finally dropped the GFI name, so they kind of bought the tool set of them and brought it in there. I've seen someone else, and this is something valid. I've seen people say that they don't like about Pfsense is they want to be able to remote in and manage everything as opposed to managing it through the GUI. That's a valid argument. You do want to manage everything in Pfsense through their interface because the interface pushes all the settings. So if you change settings from the command line, the interface will overwrite them again. And that's kind of a complaint some people have because they want to remotely manage it by just SSHing in and, I just want to run this script real quick. Right. I think there's probably some workarounds, but they're not clear. I do everything right through the web interface on it.
Yeah. SolarWinds is great. I've used it in the past, especially for IPAM, but you should check out Glacier. I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, which one? I'll look that one up real quick here. Which
Kaseya.
IT management monitoring. The problem always comes down to, and I haven't looked at this one. There's a really cool file that is for doing MSP comparisons.
Oh, all right.
And it's really cool, all the different platforms on there. But one of the things about that is it kind of comes down to once you deploy all your clients on it, it's really hard to switch. It's like, okay, how much are we going to have to do here? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I have 500, 600, 700 computers on SolarWinds. How do I move them over to something else?
Yeah, the migration path is definitely a consideration. Because that could take your business offline for a good chunk of time.
Yeah, and of course it generates a whole lot of work.
Oh yeah.
So there's that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm always willing to look at different ones. I was trying to find this. I was going to post a link in there for everyone. There's an entire link for all the comparisons.
There's someone said it's actually pronounced Kaseya, which that's cool. What's funny to me, and like I was thinking about this last night, like as far as marketing goes, if you don't want people to mispronounce your product, then make a product that's easily pronounceable. Right? Like Microsoft. You can't like screw that up, right? You know what I mean? Like, but I can pronounce Kaseya 5 different ways by looking at that name. So like, I get a lot of that with Ubiquity too. I mean, Ubiquity. Actually, I get it misspelled more than anything else. People will spell it with a Y at the end. That's why in the SEO of my YouTube videos, I always put UBIQUITY as one of the keywords.
Yeah, if people go to reddit.com/r/MSP, there's a lot of links in there to all the comparisons. I realize I can't post links in here. So yeah, that'll kind of cover like all the suggestions in there. I've looked at a lot of different MSP stuff before we settled on SolarWinds. One of the things we liked about SolarWinds was all the licenses are inclusive. That's many other companies do that. And so it works really good for the small business model. A lot of them will manage the software, but they don't manage all the licensing. So you got to get the licenses and you load them up into the machines. And it's one less thought on one less thing for us to do. For everyone I sign up, if we add a computer, automatically a license is included and automatically added to my bill. My employees don't have to do anything. They can go, oh, we onboarded 10 more computers at a client, 20 more computers. No problem. It just adds it to the bill. I don't have like a license, because some of you have to pre-buy 50 licenses, and when you run out, you got to buy another 50 or whatever. Yeah. It saves me all those little details.
and ease of management, like you, especially when running a business like an MSP, or even what I do. Like, so I don't consider myself to be an MSP. I consider myself to be more of a consulting shop, right? But it's sort of the same in that the problem that I'm running into, and I'm assuming that you probably hit this problem as well at some point during your growth cycle, is that there's only one Chris and there's only one Tom, right? Mm-hmm. So at some point you get to the point where you have to offload some of the work to other people, and being able to let go and sort of go through that growth period and be able to scale your business, even though you're only putting the same amount of time into the business, is really a challenge. Did you run into any of that as you were getting started?
All the time it's, even as I have 8 employees now, and it's still some challenges you face, because there's this constant making sure everything's a process procedure that doesn't rely on you. And it's like, okay, what is it that led to this project landing on my lap that my employees couldn't do it? And you're like, okay, there's a process procedure that I got to write, and got to document, and got to train somebody on so it can be handled.
Well, training is key, and good documentation is key. One of the reasons that I do these videos is to document stuff for myself, honestly, because there's many times where like I do something and I'm like, oh, I did a video on that. In fact, just yesterday, Lenny, I redid the IVR in my phone system. I had rebuilt my phone system a while back, and I never reinstalled Lenny. So I went back to my own video on how to install Lenny, and I watched it to learn how to do it again. Because, in IT, if you're not doing something every day, it's very easy to forget how you did it.
Exactly. And I have a series of like mini videos I did on using Dig or using ZenMap and some of the tools that we use regularly here. And one of my newer employees, it was kind of funny. He started looking up how to use some of the Dig tools and looking for a YouTube video, and my video was a top result. He's like, oh, look, you're the one that did the video on this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, look, I did. It's now serving as a reference for both me and them.
Yeah. How do you respond to someone directly in this chat? Do you have to put a plus in front of their username?
That's a good question. Is it plus? There's an at. Oh, use an at symbol.
Oh, at. Thanks. I just wanted to say thanks. But, I actually kind of did the same thing. Like, my channel became popular because I did the Free PBX 101 series, and the SEO that I put on that series basically made it so that if you searched Free PBX in Google, just the words Free PBX, my video showed up in the video results, like right on the front page, and that really sort of boosted the channel.
They're asking about NAS. I guess we should probably talk about NAS.
Yeah, let's do it. Let me just respond to Troy here. OBS. So we're using Open Broadcaster. They just came out with a new version. It's funny, Tom and I were sitting here for about half an hour before we started the live stream, because I was just trying to figure out the new version of Open Broadcaster. It killed off all of my old settings, all of my old screen setups, because I can switch back and forth between different modes and whatever. And so I've only got 2 right now because I haven't got them all set back up. But anyways, yes, Alex, I do use Apple products. I use iPhone. That's it. I have nothing else that's Apple. But I guess that is considered an Apple product, so that's it, yeah. And the reason, honestly, I would switch to Android, and I may or may not switch to Android because this phone's up for, I can get a new one in October, so it's coming up pretty soon. my wife uses an iPhone also. And that's really, like, literally, that's the only reason why I would stick to iPhone, is because we, text each other a lot, and you get a lot of extra bells and whistles from iPhone to iPhone texting that you wouldn't get from Android to iPhone testing. The one main one is the little 3 dots that show up, the ellipses that show, is it ellipses? Yeah, that show up like when someone is responding to a text, right? That works when you're going iPhone to iPhone. So like if I text my wife something and then I can see that she's writing me back, and just that one little key feature is why I would probably stick with iPhone.
Yeah, I gotta admit, Google's really got to consolidate. So I'm stuck in the land of confusion. I use Google Fi for my phone service, so I'm directly using it. Google uses Google Fi with Hangouts for texting from my desktop, calling from my desktop, and texting from my phone. I'm now getting messages, and what Google announced are deprecating Hangouts. I said, okay, how do I text from my browser? Because they're saying you're deprecating it, but it keeps working. And it keeps warning me that it doesn't work anymore, but it does work.
Maybe it's just hanging on for dear life.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, what are you guys going to do? Because I want a unified platform so I can start a text message on my phone, send it, and see the history of that text message on my desktop.
Right.
And that's lost in the Android world, but iPhone people are like, well, it works.
Yeah. You know what? I just thought of another Apple product that I use, and it's the Apple TV. I did a video a while back on like cutting the cord, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I really got to get to a follow-up to that video, because it's been about a year, and like I've now sort of like really dialed in like the cutting of the cord. And Apple TV, in my opinion, is heads and tails better than any other like Roku or that type of device that's out there. For just a couple of reasons. It's mostly related to the remote control. The remote control on the Apple TV, you can use it without pointing it at the Apple TV.
It's so nice.
So that's the one thing,
right? It's a really nice product.
And the fact that it has volume controls on the remote that interface through the HDMI, and you can turn up and down the volume from the one remote. Like those 2 features alone put Apple TV over the top for all those sort of connected devices.
Yeah, I have an Amazon Fire. I used to have an Apple TV, and I ended up getting rid of it. We didn't use all the fancy features as much, and we cut the cord in 2011, so I haven't had cable TV in 6 years now. Anyways, even the kids, everyone in the family all has a Chromecast. So that's pretty much what we settled on. I have an Amazon Fire that I never, ever use. I once in a while, if some movie comes out on Amazon that looks cool, I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll do that. But the nice thing with the Chromecast is it works perfectly fine with my Plex server.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I don't own all the movies on my Plex server.
Of course not. No.
Yeah, I own all the movies on my Plex server. And Plex server is a great way to play all those movies that I own.
That's another good lead-in into Freenas, right? So I also use Plex at home for my movies that I've backed up off of DVD. And it's a really good platform for that kind of stuff. It's great to have especially for my kids, they can have it on any TV. They can watch, stop it and pick it up in a different room and all that sort of stuff. So let's talk about Freenas a little bit. Let's go ahead and get into it. I've got so let me tell you about my needs first of all. This is basically I was joking with Tom that I had him on here to get free Freenas consulting. And I'm only I'm half serious about that. So okay, so I guess here's my need, and then I'll let you take over and sort of basically guide the direction that you would go based on my needs. So I do have, of course, a need. I want to have Plex on it, obviously, but storage capacity wise, I'm going to be somewhere between. I'd like to look at somewhere between 12 and 20 terabytes. It doesn't need to be a ton of space. I'm going to have basically Plex, and then also, all of my music files, and then also I want to consolidate my documents for all of my computers in my home onto it as well. So those are sort of my 3 needs. The form factor, I'm okay with here, let me show you the case that I was looking at. It's this one. The Fractal Design Node 804. This is a case that looks like it would work pretty well. In fact, I picked this up. I found this case because of doing research for Freenas, and someone else had used this in their Freenas build, and it looked like a good solid option, especially for the amount of airflow. Like you can have, I think, two 140 millimeter and two 120 millimeter fans in this case to get like some super good airflow. So let's talk about it top to bottom. I'm also open to a rack mountable server case though, because I do have a rack in the other room that I can use. So I'll let you take it away. What would you tell me as a guy who's just looking to get into Freenas?
So what was your storage need again, and what was the total size you're looking?
Well, I'm looking at probably a 4. What I want to do is 4 Western Digital red drives in a RAID 10 configuration. Eight
probably. Well, start with, because you're going to run ZFS, you're probably going to want like a RAID Z2 configuration.
Okay, explain that. What is that?
All right. So when you go to ZFS, and ZFS is the file system that which Freenas is based on. ZFS, it came out of Oracle development, but it's all open source and really, really popular file system for a few reasons. It is a cow file system, copy on write, so super redundant, and really you can pull, and I've even talked to some of the engineers I've known that work on it. And the guy who wrote the book, wrote 2 books, Michael Lucas, if you want to look him up, on how the ZFS file system work. It's really fun talking to him and meeting him at the talks. He's a local guy, and I've actually spoke at his local FreeBSD club that he has. But anyways, it's so fault tolerant, you can randomly turn it off, and it's literally difficult to screw up a file system. It's basically always live, never needs to be file checked because of the way it works. It's a completely different schema for the way they do things. I won't get into deep technical details on it. But that being said, the RAID formats on there are a little bit different. So instead of the normal pairing and using like a parity drive, it spreads the parity across all the drives. Mm-hmm. So that you have RAID Z1, Z2, or Z3. And what you're looking at is redundancy. So in a 4-drive RAID, you should be able to, with a RAID Z2 system, lose 2 drives and still have it work. We just built the RAID Z2 system, but we used 6 hard drives. That way we guarantee any 2 hard drives, you can fail them and there's not a problem. Now the problem when you have it set to a RAID Z1 and you only have 1 hard drive for parity is when you do the rebuild and replace that, you run the risk of stressing the other drives and causing a failure because you're stressing all the other ones out. So that's one of the advantages of RAID Z2. The disadvantage is you lose space.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, well, you would lose space with a RAID 10 setup as well. Yeah. For any time you start increasing redundancy, you start decreasing the amount of space. And I'm okay with that. I mean, as far as this build goes, I'm expecting to lose space. Like I said, I want it to be. What I'm looking for is, especially since I'm going to build this up as a tutorial series on my channel, I want it to be like the best practice build for Freenas, right? So yeah. So you said it was called ZF2?
RAID Z2.
RAID Z2. Okay, so yep. RAID Z2 sounds like you can lose 50% of the drives, right? So is that basically essentially a RAID 10 almost, or equivalent to?
Yep. Yeah, it's like an equivalent to, and it's just a different type of Freenas. So, and you're saying 4 terabyte drives?
8 terabyte drives.
8. Oh wow, go big.
Well, I mean, again, that's sort of an option to discuss, right? As far as like the pricing of the drives, it seems to me like, it seems to me like 8 4 terabyte drives would be a lot pricier. Let's see how that works out. 137.05 versus 279. Yeah, so I guess it's almost a wash, but
yeah, when we were looking at it too, whether you go to 4 or 6, it scales perfectly. There's not like one of them has really hit that sweet spot yet.
Yeah. So, but the advantage that I was seeing with 8 terabyte drives is that if I did ultimately want to expand the system in the future, adding more 8 terabyte drives would, there's going to be more drive bays available as opposed to having a ton of 4 terabyte drives.
Right. But one of the problems that you run into is the way, once you build a pool in ZFS, or a ZVol as they call it, once you build that volume, the volume's not expandable. So you build it with the drives and you can't just pop another drive in later. I know that's something like Drobo supports. They have you can just expand it on the fly RAID systems. That's not something because of the way ZFS is designed. So what we've done when we've had to replace them is like, say we have a server and we want to use the same server, but we want to replace the hard drives in it. We actually do a dump to another one, then replace the drives, then dump it all back.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's not any, because you can't just say, oh, I want to add one more to this volume. Once you create like a 4-drive or a 6-drive RAID, there's not any way you could just easily expand them.
Right. So what do you think about like case airflow? Because the reason I was looking at this case over like a server chassis that was like rack mountable is, again, just strictly for airflow. It seems like having more cubic inches in the side of the case with fans running is going to be better in the long run for the system than having like a 1U or 2U rack mountable server that's sucking in airflow from the front.
Yes, definitely good airflow is important. Those cases, the Fractal ones, I wanted to put our system that we were building in that. It was a toss-up. We're either going to build it with that. Instead, I went with the Kingwin because we wanted the drives to be removable from the front because of where it's going in their system. We didn't want to have to slide it in and out. They don't have a rack, but they have like a place where they have another Dell server sitting next to it. But I do really like that case. But the nice thing about Western Digital Reds is they're also not high temperature drives. So we have the Western Digital Reds, and they're running 5 degrees cooler per drive than the other ones. Which ones I use? Hitachis that we have in the machines. So same box, same amount of airflow. We have some Hitachi ones, and we have some of the Western Digital Reds, and the Reds are cooler by 5 degrees per drive, and they're just right there.
Well, like you start talking about Western Digital versus Seagate versus other types of hard drives that are out there, and it's like the Coke versus Pepsi debate, man. You're going to have so many opinions, and people, what it really boils down to, in my opinion, is basically the drives that people have had the best experience with. Me personally, I've always had great experience with Western Digital drives. I use the Western Digital purples in my NVR builds. I've got a Western Digital black for my storage drive down here. And for the NAS, I was looking at their red series. So I like the Western Digitals. A lot of people will argue that, though. They'll say, nope, Seagate's best or IBM's best or whatever.
So Western Digital, one of the things we like about them is their warranty process is super easy to deal with, which is also an important factor.
Yeah, sure.
So when you have to return something, Western Digital lets you, they just ask, when did you purchase the drive? They ask that, and we've returned drives that were over a year old without a problem at all. Like that we didn't buy. Like people brought computers in, and we're like, oh, we could probably get this returned under warranty for you. And they're like, cool. And they've been really easy to deal with.
Question, before we get too far into, what are your thoughts on Synology versus Freenas?
You know, those boxes are pretty nice. The client that we just put the Freenas in for, they also have a Netgear ReadyNAS, older model. I don't remember the exact model one, but it's about 5 years old, and it's held up really well. We have a handful of clients existing that have had those, and another one that we put one in for. I'm not disappointed in them. They're pretty impressive. I seen someone mention Drobo. Drobo's another one that's pretty good. They're not bad boxes because they're specifically tasked and designed. They seem to make a pretty good box. My worries about any of those boxes is because some of them use their own versions of RAID. Is if something happens, how recoverable is it? Could I take those drives and put in another one, or do I got to find that same model? And I've never tried the import. But for ZFS, for example, I know I can completely just grab the RAID array, grab the drives, pile them up, plug them in any order to another box, and Freenas will import the volume.
Yeah, I installed a Synology for a client of mine. It was actually a lawyer's office, and they had not a ton of storage. They had maybe like 6 or 10 gigabytes worth of storage. I mean, not a ton. And they just had a file server. It was just a regular Linux file server, but it was getting kind of old, and they just wanted some sort of backup. So I put in a Synology with the thinking that, like, look, if your file server ever crashes, you can just basically run straight off this Synology. So I set it up so that it does backups. Right? It does backups from the Linux box over to the Synology NAS. But I told them, I said, listen, you don't need a separate file server. You could just use this as your file server if the Linux server ever crashes. So, yeah, in that case, I liked it a lot. Plus, I always get I get emails from that box all the time. They're like, "Hey, you're going down for a reboot. We're installing updates." You know, so I kind of like the Synology OS and the system, but ultimately, I'm a DIY guy, so I think Freenas is going to be more my wheelhouse.
Well, and one of the other advantages of Freenas is the list of plugins is very extensible. The other thing you can do, if you're going to build it on a little bit faster processor, for example, the new Freenas that came out that was just released the other day, I've been testing it. It works really good. We won't talk about the Freenas 10 debacle. We'll just say that's a mess, and you can read the apologies from the Freenas people about that.
I heard that 11 was just released.
11 was just released. I've been testing it since a release candidate. Just haven't had a chance to do any videos on it. But they kept all the features. Now, one of the features they added, though, was they added a hypervisor built in so you can run virtualization on it. Now, that's a really cool feature going, hey, I want to spin up virtual machines and manage them and destroy them as I want. That's another advantage you'll have with the Freenas box is that extensibility is built right in.
Yeah.
The other thing too is the plugins they have for Freenas. You can even duplicate your system on an Amazon S3 server, or you can replicate using ZFS replicate tools. You can take Freenas boxes and mirror them to each other, so you have another Freenas as an exact backup of itself.
Okay, now we're getting expensive.
We're getting expensive. You got to build it all twice.
Well, listen, you start going down the redundancy rabbit hole, and this is what I always tell my clients is like, listen. The more redundant you get, the price does not go up. It goes up almost exponentially, right?
Yeah.
And like the example that I use is like, look, the Earth is our biggest single point of failure, right? So
it really is. We only got one of these right now.
Yeah, we can definitely open up that data center on the moon, but crap, is that going to be expensive?
Exactly.
All right, Eric, thank you for joining. We'll see you later. Okay, so let's move on, though. Let's talk about CPU. So I had found this motherboard, Supermicro motherboard. I'm happy with the Supermicro stuff. And I got this motherboard because I was looking at going with a Xeon E3 for the CPU for the Freenas box. Good choice, or is there something else that you would be looking at?
So what's the processor you're looking at there?
I'm looking at the Xeon E3 1220.
Okay. Solid. I don't think you have any problems there.
Okay, that's good. Now, one of the considerations, though, is the RAM, right? And whether or not to use ECC. I saw a decent amount of debate in the small amount of research that I was doing on whether it's prudent to use ECC as opposed to standard DDR3.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Does ECC, which is a error correcting RAM, for those who don't know, does it make a big difference? Well, RAM doesn't fail very often. Early days in the 90s when I was putting together servers, there was a big deal and there was a lot of error correction. I used to even do, because they have like a special form of ECC, I used to be an AIX administrator for the old IBM stuff. There's a lot of that kind of things in there. It would tell you errors that may have found in there and everything else. That was 20 years ago now. And
right.
RAM's become really, really reliable. ZFS, we're going to go back to one of the reasons Freenas and I talk about ZFS a lot. ZFS has a CRC system, cycler redundancy check. It does checking prior to writes. And the write table, what you may kind of consider like a fat table, is spread across the drives. For every time it writes those, and it's a journaling type file system, which means there's an integrity check for each write. So if the memory were to somehow flip a bit that didn't crash the operating system, but crashed the functioning memory that was within Freenas, and then somehow wrote a corrupted table, that's the theory people go behind to say that could corrupt it. But it would be an amazing series of events that I just have never seen happen to cause this. So non-ECC in short seems to be perfectly fine. ECC does provide some error correction, but bad memory is just not like it used to be. Memory failure is pretty rare, and when they do fail, memory has failed on us. The computer crashes, it doesn't work anymore, and the OS won't boot, or especially doesn't stay stable, and we replace it.
And I mean, ECC memory, if we look at this, let's see, DDR3.
You add a lot to the build price.
8 gigabytes. It's about twice as expensive.
Yep. And the board you were looking at, does that board you were looking at support ECC and non-ECC memory? That's another factor. The board has to have support for the ECC.
Let's see. This just says DDR3 SDRAM. I mean, I assume that it does support ECC ECC, because the Freenas build that I stole all these parts off of, they used ECC.
It may only support ECC. Some of those boards are like that.
That's true. Especially a server board might only
Yep.
support ECC. So that is a very good point. I'll have to take a look at that and figure that out before moving forward. I think there's actually newer versions of this same motherboard though, that I'll have to do a little bit more research on. But yeah, if you can save a couple $100, because look, like regular 8 gig RAMs, and I wanted to do 32 gigs of RAM. That was my sort of target point. 8 gigs times 4 of non-ECC RAM looks like it's somewhere between $50 and $60, right? Whereas the ECC equivalent is going to be about twice that.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot more. And then I'm going to look real quick here. We use I'm going to get you the model number for what we built with ours, but we use the Gigabyte Ultra Durable motherboard and an AMD build. And in one of those things comes down to price. We use the Gigabyte 970A D3P. Those are one of Gigabyte's ultra durable boards. It's a solid board, non-ECC memory. It doesn't support ECC, but it's worked really well. And what it comes down to is how much processing power do you need? Plex, to be honest, doesn't take a lot.
Yeah, Plex doesn't take a lot, but transcoding does.
Transcoding does.
If you don't have everything in like the right formats and it has to transcode on the fly, that could potentially pop up your CPU and memory.
I've actually got an old. I'm running an old 4-core Pentium, like a 6-year-old one. That's my Plex server at home, and it transcodes fine at full 1080, even when some things aren't in full 1080.
Really?
I've been shocked. It pins the processor, and there's a stutter for the first 10 seconds, and then it works fine.
So someone asked, Chris, is Ryzen 1800X for Freenas? Is it good to use Ryzen 1800X for Freenas?
You know, we haven't tested it, but I don't see any reason why a Ryzen processor wouldn't be great for Freenas. We didn't need that much horsepower for the build we just did, but it's definitely a consideration on there.
So talk about the build that you just did. I know that you just put a video out on it. You can plug the video a little bit and then also talk about it.
So what we did, we went with the Thermaltake Case, and I can't remember the model, but it's one of the only ones because this is getting hard to find.
I think it's pronounced Thermaltake.
Hello, I'm Tom Lawrence.
Oh, Thermaltake.
I'm the owner of Lawrence.
No, I'm just kidding.
So the Thermaltake Case, one of the things we did with that case was we needed one that had 4 5.25 external bays, and that's hard to find. Not a lot of cases seem to have that. You know, back in the early days, you could have cases that were like, you know, monster tall with all 5.25. And the reason we did that is because we went with the Kingwin 5.5-inch trayless SATA tracks or SATA dock. You just slide the drives in, and they just snap in. I love that dock. That dock is really nice.
I see that you capitalized non-ECC memory.
I did, because I knew someone would be mad, and I have angered the people. You can read the comments below. I mean, and I have a comment for it's just like I explained. I said I didn't use it. I still feel there's less than a % chance of ever having a problem with it. I'm more money's better spent on redundancy of all the data. So, you know, we want an entire copy because there's going to be, they have about 4 to 5 terabytes that we're dumping to it actually this weekend. The data is very static. It's not accessed very often. They're a civil engineering company. They want more than one copy of this data because the data needs to be readily available. They do sewer videos. So they scan sewers. And if there's an incident, a flood or a sewer collapses, they need to be able to just find that video and play it back and prove that they inspected it. Well, that being said, it's not a high usage system, so It's not high volume. But what they do want is, hey, if it crashes or hard drive RAID array crashes, let's go pull it from the cloud. That's 4 terabytes of sewer videos.
Right.
It's a lot of crap to download is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it sounds like a shitty job.
It sounds like a shitty job. So to download all that crap again. So we're going to keep 2 copies of the data because a lot of it can be of the moment when they're doing these things.
Right.
So.
Well, that's cool. So this is one of your videos I've got up here. Freenas system built on consumer hardware and non-ECC memory. Follow up after running for 2 years.
Yep, I did that too. Someone asked me. They said they want to know what happens after a couple of years. Well, I can't jump to the future, or I would have bought some Amazon stock.
Yeah.
but I went and said, we've had our machine. We built it 2 years ago. It's readily available. So it was a quick way for me to make a video. I don't like logging in the client stuff with everything running to make videos. I don't really do that. But we've got clients who got this deployed at as well. One of them's, he's been running Freenas for like 5 years on a consumer system. He's expanded. I told him he should replace it because he was a small company and he got to be a really big company. And I'm like, glad it still works. You should probably get a bigger system.
Right. Time to upgrade. Yeah.
But I've had no problems with our system. Like I said, running for 2.2 years and no drive failures. Now, if someone points out that there's a drive failure video I did, it is, but it's not on the volume I did. And I actually explained in the video, I found out, and I don't know why, when we pair up Toshiba drives in a RAID, it just doesn't like working. They just keep dumping errors whenever I put the Toshibas. I swapped them out for 2 different drives, and that Toshiba drive is in my computer now. Works perfectly fine with no errors.
Huh.
So, yeah, we're just like,
Interesting.
So, yeah, so right now we're sticking with, that's the one I did for the 2-year build and whatnot. But back a little bit to the build we did before we jump around too far. We'd use the AMD FX 8320E 8-core processor. That's the 8-core, and the E is the low energy model. So
give that to me again. AMD
8320E 8-core processor.
All right, let's pull that up here. $128 for that CPU. Now, so this is in the Freenas.
Yeah, this is in the one we built.
So that's the 2-year-old one, or the more.
No, this is the new one we just built.
Okay.
But it's almost the same processor that's in our old one. What is in ours? I'll look real quick. I'll tell you.
So it's an interesting question, right? So the whole AMD versus Intel debate, no problems. I don't want to get into that debate, by the way, but no problems running AMD with Freenas.
Nope. Right now, my server, the one we have in the store here, has 12 gigs of RAM and an AMD A6 7400 in it. So that's one of the older ones, it's from a few years ago. It's one of those things. We happen to have it on the shelf. It was slightly used, and we said, we're not doing anything. So let me turn this into our Freenas box. And the system stays in a really heavy load because it actually synchronizes my servers off-site. So it's in the CPU at any given time is never below about a 20% usage.
Yeah.
And it's not, they haven't even, I have a stock AMD fan on it. And that actually, my employees are like, oh no, put a better fan on it. And I never did. I'm like, I'm going to.
Right. Yeah. I'll get around to it. Sure. Chris, are important the power source on a Freenas server? So I would probably say that as long as you have like a gold rated or higher power supply that just supplies enough power to power all the drives that you have, it's probably going to be fine. I don't think the power supply is the biggest consideration. No,
you want efficiency on there. And if you look, the WD Red's another advantage I'm trying to look up, but I think they're less than 20 watts. They're actually really low wattage drives.
I don't know if it says here. Let's see specifications. It doesn't really say anything. Yep.
Yeah, somewhere in there is the wattage. I remember that was one of the things we looked up, so we were calculating just how much wattage the system was going to use, and they are pretty low wattage, which also explains why they are low heat.
Yeah. By the way, guys, I know a lot of people are asking questions. We can't see, if we're in the middle of a conversation, obviously we can't see everyone's questions that go by. If there is, however, a super chat functionality, if you guys use the super chat, that is a way to guarantee that your question will be answered. Of course, that costs money, but that money goes straight into the Tom and Chris Beer Fund. So, go ahead and use Super Chat if you have a question that you're dying to get answered, and we've ignored you also otherwise.
Yeah. So I'm trying to jump around. I see people discussing some of the Amazon Glacier and things like that. And to sum up everything in there is you do have to use something compliant with your clients and pre-encrypted. That's maybe another time we'll talk about that. Just all the different backup services out there and the good and the bad, the ugly of that. But that's probably something that could lend itself an entire discussion.
Yeah. I use what is this? Crash Plan.
Yeah.
I use Crash Plan. I used to use Carbonite, and their service was fine when I first started. But then, how about Amazon buying Whole Foods? I thought that was an interesting development as well. Anyways, but I used Carbonite for a long time, and eventually their pricing just got too high, and their software on the desktop was too bloated. It took up so many resources. I was constantly finding that Carbonite was just sucking up all of my CPU. For like what? Like for what reason? Just to keep, files synchronized to the cloud? That just seems odd. And I couldn't, like, you would double click on the Carbonite program and it would like show up on your screen but be frozen for a good like 20-30 seconds before it would actually like come into view. And it was through multiple builds of my computer and stuff. It just ultimately stopped working very well. Crash Plan has been good and I've been happy with it. So I'm a proponent of Crash Plan.
Yeah, I seen someone else say not a fan of Carbonite either, and I've had the same experience with them going. It just seems to slow it down a little bit, especially when you have really high volumes of files. Yeah. So, back to the Freenas. There's a couple questions there. Oh, so
hey,
you got a beer.
Thanks, Nick.
Awesome.
I will buy myself a beer. I'm not going to start drinking like I did on the last live chat because I was asleep by like 4 p.m. that day. So. That was Memorial Day, though. That was our excuse.
Yeah, that's all you need is an excuse. So, you have a question, but thank you for the beer. On the comment of, do you install FreeNAS to a USB drive? Now, that is a feature that I've seen some people said they don't like, but it's a feature I love about the way FreeNAS. Why would I want to waste a hard drive on an OS that just has to read and push itself into memory?
Yeah.
So you do have to buy a thumb drive when you do your build, and I recommend, because thumb drives are all of $10 each. Right. There's a couple tough drives you can get. I think Sun? A couple companies make them. You can look up some higher quality ones.
I just
but you buy two of them.
Where was that one that I just got? I just used it for that attempted FreeNAS build that I did that didn't work. Oh, here it is down here. It dropped on the ground. This is a really nice little one. This is just a Kingston Data Traveler, tiny little one. This is 16 gigs. It was $8. So I just literally picked that up last week.
And you can buy two of them. And if you're doing an install on FreeNAS, when you do the install, and I showed this in my video, you select both of the thumb drives. It automatically creates a mirror. So that way, if one of them fails, it still boots.
Two questions I have. What errors have you encountered installing FreeNAS? Because so now I installed it on this yesterday. I tried to, anyways, and it came up, it installed, and then after I rebooted, it just was turning the NIC on and off over and over and over, and it just was popping up errors related to like EM0 is online, EM0 is offline, EM0 is online, offline, on, and it was just doing that over and over and over and never went anywhere. I assume it's just hardware incompatibility.
Yeah, I've had RAID arrays it doesn't like, weird controllers it doesn't like, because I've seen someone mention like throwing it on an old server. I run into weird quirks doing on old servers. So someone had a really good point, because I've talked about this before, and we'll jump real quick to this before I forget. When you order the hard drives, don't order 4 hard drives from the same vendor. Order 2 from Amazon, 2 from Newegg, or wherever change it up. And the reason why is you're going to get batches of hard drives sent to a supplier, and they're just going to pull from that batch.
Yep.
If there was a bad run, you'll find them all failing at once.
Yeah.
So buying them from 2 different vendors. And now, cool thing, Micro Center is really close to us, and they match Amazon's price. Amazon had the best price, so we went and picked up Micro Center, had them take $20 off a drive to match Amazon, and then we ordered the other ones from Amazon.
So I'm gonna butcher this. Kelngren? I don't know. Anyways, he says, don't use a RAID controller with FreeNAS. Thank you, Alex, for the super chat. Appreciate that. There's another couple of beers for us. Much appreciated. So HBA versus RAID. Don't use a RAID controller with FreeNAS. And that's sort of, in my research, a hardware RAID controller, I should say. That's sort of what I've read as well, is let FreeNAS handle the RAID. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. You do not want it in there. One of my favorite things that's been repeated and cut into little, I think there's someone who made a meme in one of the tech channels about it. The guys from Backblaze use software RAID, and they were talking about what an increase by not using the RAID controllers. And apparently it was the myth of the RAID controller. And there's the guy who from Backblaze did a tech talk about it at some conference. And it was basically, everyone thought these RAID people were writing really good software. Apparently they're writing really crappy software, because when we switched to software RAID, it got faster.
Oh, funny. Well, so from what I understood in my research is that if you're utilizing a hardware RAID controller, then Freenas doesn't have visibility into some of the things that the hardware RAID is handling, and therefore may like conflict somehow.
Yes, it really wants direct visibility to the drives. It's made to run raw on the hardware. And so you definitely want to have it. And that's one of those things. Like if you look at, like I said, someone said buying an older used, bourbon. I like that.
Thank you, Matt. Matthew, thank you for that. Upgrade to a glass of bourbon. That's funny.
Yeah. So if you look at the building on an older hardware, one of the challenges you have is sometimes you have to reflash the RAID controllers to allow visibility. And I was reading some articles on this because we looked at getting a used system to build one on, and it was like, wow, you got to find this model controller and then you flash it with a firmware from another controller because it opens up this option. I'm like, this is a headache. I'm just finding a bunch of ports.
Yeah, just keep it simple. You know, that's one of the biggest things in IT is just keep it simple. And like if you're having to deal with all that, that's too much. I had another question for you. So when you build, one of the articles that I read about setting up Freenas put like a lot of attention on the burn-in process. Burning in your RAM, burning in your hard drives. Is that something that you do? What do you think about that that whole thing?
There's some truth to that. One of the things we do is I just grabbed my YouTube collection, which is about I don't know almost 2 terabytes I think, and I dumped it over to the Freenas for the customer one we're going to build. And one of the things you have with that is you just start dumping all the data, and that's when you notice the errors because generally there's no errors sitting there. And we're not sure, but we did have an error of it turned out to be I'm thinking a SATA cable. We've kept getting one drive giving a CRC error randomly, but it would do it like for every half a terabyte you copied, you get one error.
Right.
But still, we've seen the error. So we swapped out the SATA cable and we deleted the whole pool, rebuilt the pool, dumped all the data back, dumped it forth, and no problem. And no, it hasn't done it since. But I think that's important that you don't want to find out something's going bad when you first start dumping it. And we had we had a bad hard drive out of the box. And as soon as we started loading it up, the load on the system peaked out. Everything went just crazy down in terms of speed. We're like, what is wrong with this? Like you're scratching your head. And when we got over close up to the box, we could hear what was wrong. It was like, jink, jink. So we're like, okay. But if we would have actually just delivered that to the client without testing, we would have known that out of the box, one hard drive was just banging away like that.
Jacob Hopkins, $10 super chat. Thank you so much. Agree with Alex. Been subbed to the channel since 1000 and can't tell you how much I've learned about FreePBX, Unify, and IT in general. Recently found Tom's channel and love the content as well. Well, thank you so much. And Tom,
thank you, checking.
The interesting thing, and one of the things that I love about Tom's channel is the holy moly Mario, thank you very much. $25 super chat. Oh, $25
I like
Canadian.
This.
$25 Canadian super chat. You're a lot closer to Canada than I am.
I am. It's a couple miles from here.
Upgrade to cask single malt. Thank you very much, Mario. But one of the things that I really love about Tom's channel is the quantity of content that you put out. I don't have time to put out the quantity that you do. So it's just, you guys got to understand that for every, like I put out a 20-minute video yesterday and it was on just migrating from a tough switch to a Unify switch and basically looking at the VLANs and all that sort of stuff. But what went into that 20-minute video was probably easily 4 to 5, maybe 6 hours worth of work between preparation, creating a couple Visios to make everything look, so that it's very easy to display on the screen and all that, recording the video, editing the video, uploading the video, all of that takes time. And so you're putting out 3 or 4 videos a week, right? At this point?
Yeah. I'm trying to keep a steady 3 or 4 video a week. And it's been, so building the new office was a big part of that. So we got a new building, we got a much a lot more space to do stuff, which part of my problem before was setting up and breaking down equipment because we were using my tech area as a video studio and then moving the video studio over to get back to work. And I hired more people. That's another thing too. My company's doing well. and I'm able to spend more time on videos while my company does things, and I get less involved, so to speak, in certain parts of the boring part, as they call it. Like, let's put the physical motherboard in. I don't have time to do that anymore.
Yeah.
So it's able to increase my workflow and getting a lot more videos done. But it is a lot of work. I mean, like you said, a 20-minute video, there might be hours of research or something. My Sericata video is 29 minutes long, but I will tell you, I spent a lot of time in forums. Even though I was using it, I wanted to be as accurate as possible and understand it to be able to produce a comprehensive video. And I recorded it twice because I screwed up the microphone on the first time.
I've done that many a times. And I mean, Tom's right. Like, the research that you have to do into this stuff, especially, I'll do videos on something that I'm just learning myself, right? So you have to put that research in to make sure that you get it right on YouTube. Because, Tom, I don't know if you've experienced this or not yet, but there are people on YouTube that will point out when you've said something incorrectly.
You are never as wrong as when you're wrong on the internet. That is when you're the most wrong you've ever been, and you learn about it very quickly.
Yeah, that's in my opinion one of the biggest learning curves with YouTube, was learning how to deal with the haters, right? Learning how to take criticism constructively, even when it wasn't meant to be constructive criticism.
Exactly. It's definitely an interesting world, and for the most part, I've been pretty good. But I've had an occasional troll because my email address is publicly out there. I make sure I'm easy person generally to get a hold of. But wow, I've had at least one person that was clearly upset because I had mentioned very briefly someone in the Linux community who developed something. They happened to be the author of a tool that I used, and that led to someone chasing me down. Apparently this person, unbeknownst to me, the person I was speaking of that developed the tool, had a political activist standpoint on something to do with females and technology that this person was upset by. So they chased me around and sent me lots of emails and tweets and everything, all trying to get me to know what my stance was. I'm like, I honestly have no opinion on the incident that person had.
Right.
They developed cool software that I use. I don't know what they do in their personal life.
Yeah, it's like, I don't care about your politics, guy. Just, I'm using your tool. That's it.
Yeah, and I said that. I said, they're like, I need your opinion on this. I'm like, I don't have an opinion. You have to have an opinion. I'm like, no, I really don't have to have an opinion on political things. I can keep playing with ZFS and Freenas.
Right. Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, I've put out videos that, that if I put out that same video again today, it would be much different. And that stuff is, I don't delete them off the channel if I feel like, I've learned differently and do things differently. I don't delete my old videos, but that's part of IT, is it's a learning experience and you're always learning. So I
redid the video on the SG-1000 because the firmware and my answers to how that system worked changed a little bit. And it was part of because of the firmware change, and I didn't properly cover my testing procedures. So I modified that video to say, see link for new video, because the video was so popular. I didn't want to, like you said, I don't delete them.
Sure.
So I put see link, and I changed the description to be the link to a new version, essentially, of the same video.
Right. Yep, that works. That works. Of course, I did that with my FreePBX series, where my original FreePBX series was based on FreePBX 11, and my new, FreePBX 12, and my new series is based on FreePBX 13. But the FreePBX 12 series still gets way more views, even though I've already put banners all over it saying, "Hey, newer version, go here." It's still it's interesting that people are still drawn to that older version regardless. I think it's just related to straight up SEO and the amount of views and the way that YouTube's algorithms display that type of stuff to, other people.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because if it starts autocomplete, I didn't look if it autocompletes it, but like if you're typing free PBX version, and if it finishes 12, because 12 is before 13, they're going to press enter on that before they touch the 13.
That's true. So William Warren, what screen sharing software are you using to get your screen onto your videos? So I use a program called Faststone Screen Capture. It's all one word, Faststone. And it works pretty good because it records both my microphone as well as the desktop. And then I use my face cam as a Canon 70D DSLR. So I use Faststone to record the whole screen and the audio, and then I put all of that into Adobe Premiere, and I do the zooms and stuff on the screen with Adobe Premiere. I don't do that while I'm recording. I do that in post. And I know, Tom, you use what, Kdenlive?
Caden Live. I have been, and this came up in a discussion the other day. I've been running Linux full time as my desktop with my business because my entire business runs on Linux since 2009. And around 2012 or 13 is when I switched. Even every desktop in the building is that. So I'm a big Linux advocate, obviously, including my staff.
Sure.
And it runs our backend, but it's because I'm running Linux on desktop, I don't run Windows tools for things like that. So I'm using OBS for a lot of screen recording, and all my editing is done with the Caden Live software, which finally is coming to Windows, which is pretty exciting.
Cool. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I was looking at, I mean, really the only reason that I'm still using Windows above anything else is the Adobe Creative Suite, which, you know, they have said nothing about any sort of Linux ports on that ever. So it's likely never going to happen.
It's not going to happen, unfortunately, but it is their, Adobe admitted in an interview, it's their most requested feature of all time.
I don't doubt it. I mean, because if the Adobe Creative Suite was available on Linux, I would probably switch, no problem. You know, and I could. You could make the argument that, like, look, there's things like Caden Live, there's things like, you know, GIMP or other, you know, tools that are there to replicate what Photoshop does, and you can essentially do a fairly good replacement of the entire Adobe Creative Suite with open source or maybe not even open source, but Linux-based software. However, what that doesn't take into account is the learning curve for switching over to that sort of stuff. Like, I know Photoshop very well. I know Adobe Premiere very well. And having to stop and now learn a whole new platform, even though it's like, you know, similar concepts, different buttons, that is a big roadblock to overcome.
Oh yeah. And I think you're being kind saying you can do a decent job. I don't think anything compares to Photoshop, and I have VirtualBox on my computer and I have Windows running a VirtualBox. So that's how I get my other work done. So
there was one that I had heard, what is it? Hang on, let me see if I could find this real quick. Let's see, Linux Photoshop replacement. There was something, GIMP, no, what was it? Krita. I think Krita was
really
cool. That someone recommended as a, like, even better than GIMP alternative. I have not used any of these. I've used GIMP like a tiny bit. I have not used any of the others. But Krita was supposedly pretty solid as far as a replacement.
Yeah, Krita is pretty cool, but it doesn't have the text effects and things like that. So, and maybe it's because I don't understand it. Maybe I need to do a review and get in depth with it. But it's hard because it's time over value. How much time should I spend learning something when I know Photoshop so well? And is there a demand for me to make a video on how to use that software? And literally, I'm using Photoshop on either for graphics for my websites or, you know, my YouTube thumbnails.
Right.
So
yeah. Well,
I see Inkscape is another one that's pretty good too. I seen someone mention it. Blender's awesome. I don't have that kind of time.
Oh, paid. Paint Shop Pro, Pixeliminator. What was the second one that you mentioned?
Blender was another one someone mentioned. Blender's really cool, but boy, that's a steep learning curve.
Oh, is it? Seashore, Pixlr. Yeah, like, I don't know what all these do, but looks like a lot of people are GIMP users.
Pixlr runs in a web browser.
I use GIMP on my laptop because I don't have you know, my Adobe Creative. I pay $50 a month for the Adobe subscription or whatever, and it's only for one computer. So when I'm on my laptop, I'll use GIMP, and it's a decent, you know, it gets the job done. I just don't know it as well as I know Photoshop. I've been looking at every video on YouTube about the Linux system, and think I may soon switch to Linux from Windows. I'm more interested in the server software that is available. Well, that's a very good point. You know, Linux blends the line between server and workstation. I mean, whereas, you know, Windows has a very separated set of operating systems for those two functions.
Yeah, it's it's two different flavors versus as in Linux, it's all integrated. I can just load up the Apache web server, Nginx, whatever I want to run, and start creating a local development station right inside of Linux. And I'm going to throw this out there, a little quick plug. I have a podcast I do called the Sunday Morning Linux Review, and this is what we deep dive and only talk about Linux. So that's cool. I've been doing this I've been in the Linux world for a long time. I'm a big fan, and pretty much Linux runs the internet, runs the cloud, runs all that stuff. So when it comes to servers, it's 90% of what's the back end systems running the internet.
So your Sunday Morning Linux Review, that is available on iTunes, I imagine?
Yep, available on iTunes and everywhere great podcasts are sold.
All right, cool. Where do you have guests on, or is it just you? How do you?
Yeah. Nope, I actually have a couple co-hosts. So it's me, Tony, Mary, and Phil. And our guests also are deep into Linux. Matter of fact, Phil works for the Linux Foundation. Tony, for people who want to know, it's smlr.us. Because it won't let me type in a URL.
See if I can do it. There you go.
There you go. Cool. So that's the website. All the links are on there. We do guests. We have topics. We do distro reviews. We do all those fun things. We actually, so recently I was at Microsoft Build 2017, and because Microsoft flew us out there, and they had us interviewing all the Azure team, all the Azure Edge developers on our podcast. So they flew us out there, got us all hotel rooms. It was a great fun party going to Microsoft for 5 days and interviewing. We got to meet Jeffrey Snover. He's the guy who developed PowerShell and does all the Azure stuff, and we interviewed him. He's a super interesting guy. We have a couple of the interviews published. I got one more to publish, and then we're doing another show this weekend. But yeah, so we got guests, we got a lot of different stuff. But Microsoft, because of their Azure push for Linux and the Microsoft Heart Linux, as we've been seeing, it's been kind of weird because you even see Microsoft blending in, going, we realize there's a lot of power in having Linux on some underlying stuff. So with the new versions of Windows 10, you're able to load Bash inside of there. So you can drop to the command line and control Windows functions for it. So that was kind of what we were covering there, was some of the integrations of Microsoft going, hey, we're doing some open source things over here. Look at us.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So Hugo asked, Hugo's a big fan of at least my channel. Hugo, I'm not sure if you're subscribed to Tom, but you should be if you're not. But Hugo asked, any advantage on using Debian distros over the Red Hat ones? And when anyone asks me something like that, here, let me switch my camera so that we're looking at the chat again. When anyone asks me something like that, to me, that comes down to like personal preference. Like, I learned Linux with Red Hat distributions. FreePBX is based in CentOS, which is, of course, just another version or based off of Red Hat, whatever. And so I think it's the same thing. It's just personal preference. It's what you learned on, what commands you're used to makes all the difference in the world. I don't think there's anything that you can or can't do with Debian that you can do with a Red Hat type distribution. But it's just like the package control, like how do you install and manage packages? That's going to be different. So I think it just boils down to what you learned and what your personal preference is. I like CentOS and I like Ubuntu. Those are my two go-tos.
Yeah, there's a lot of that on there. It's funny because it becomes a religious style debate between I love this distro and that, especially because I go to some of the local Linux users groups, or back when I did some of the hacking conventions. Man, you get in a discussion with that, you can split a room with it.
Yeah, well, and the people that are most like the staunchest advocates are the BSD people. Like,
oh boy, yeah. We joke. We tease Mary on our show because her wireless will occasionally not work when we're doing recordings, and she is an advocate. She runs BSD in her laptop. She's running the PC BSD variant, which I know just changed its name again. She's the BSD out of the three of us, so we just kind of laugh. We're like, "Yep, this is." It's always like she's very much. Oh, we got a BSD distro review, so.
Well, I like BSD. I've used BSD in the past, but again, ultimately it comes down to personal preference, and I like CentOS. That's my go-to.
Yeah, CentOS is good, especially for CentOS really has the lock on the web server hosting. So they just have a nice, really well integrated package for doing all the web hosting stuff.
Yeah.
pretty much like you sent to us. If you're running an ISP or web hosting company, they're really popular for a backend. I started out in Red Hat in 1998 was my first like production Red Hat server. It was a hobby. Like as soon as Linux came out, I don't know if it was in 97 when I first started trying it, but I went from trying it to loving it to 1998 administering a machine. And then I went to Debian probably around 2003, and it's just one of those, it came down to preference, and it came down to the way Debian handles packages. So once you get used to the package manager and you're like, oh, this is amazing, and away we go. And I see someone has Slackware. I made my attempt at Slackware and a lot of floppy disks, and I failed. I never got it installed.
Yeah. Let's see.
So I got into started with Slackware. I just didn't go anywhere with it.
Corey says Linux is for people who hate Windows, and BSD is for people who love Unix.
Yeah.
So, okay. I actually got started in Linux because I was working I was a network administrator for a company that they ran a web-hosted multiple listing service for real estate agents. Oh. So basically, like, if you go online, like basically like, a Zillow or whatever, but private for realtors. One of the big companies that does that product. Anyways, everything was Windows, Active Directory, and blah blah blah. It was Windows before I got there, and it had gotten to a point where like these realtors would upload thumbnails of houses. Right? You imagine every house that sells in an area has 10 to 50 pictures of that house as part of the listing, right? And those pictures are stored in two formats, the full version and a thumbnail version, right? So we would have directories in Windows that would have 10,000 or more JPEG files. Okay? And so when we would go and just double click on a folder in Windows Server that had 10,000 JPEG files in it, it would take 10 minutes for that folder to simply display on the screen. Right?
This because it's rebuilding that cache.db file.
Yeah, this is back in like the Windows, like way before Windows Server 2012 days. This was like after NT, but before 2012. I forget what the variants were in there. And so the problem was solved by simply switching to Linux file systems, right? Linux file servers. Then, even from a Windows PC, you could double click on that directory and it would immediately pop up with all of the information, right? And so just that difference sold me on Linux, and I started looking for everywhere in that company that I could use Linux as opposed to Windows. One of the other main areas that I was able to use it was for all of our DNS services. So bind over Windows DNS for servicing large amounts of DNS requests from the outside world. Heads and tails better. Jeremy, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
From Jeremy. Just wanted to give a little back for all I've learned from your respective channels. Keep it coming. Thank you so much for that, Jeremy. Appreciate it. Is there a good version of Linux Active Directory? So you're looking at probably like Radius, I guess is probably the closest you're going to get, right? But even that is a little...
There's some integrations. There's ways you could do it with Samba. There's a couple appliances that do it. It's just, I don't know.
Not a great replacement. And Windows Active Directory is so all-encompassing, you know, that it's tough to do it with just like one tool, you know? So Windows Active Directory being so all-encompassing is a plus and a minus as far as I'm concerned. Because, man, I cringe when I start thinking back to my Windows Active Directory administration days, man, because that was... Oh, it's not fun, man, administering Active Directory. And even to this day, you know, if I run across a client that wants to do like Active Directory administration for like free PBX contact lookups and even like Active Directory integration to get extensions put into free PBX and stuff, I'm always like, listen, I'm not an Active Directory guy, even though I administered Active Directory as like a full-time position for like 5 or 6 years. I'm like, listen, I'm not an Active Directory guy, so you're on your own for that part of it because... Man, I don't even want to touch it anymore.
I have such a love-hate with it. We have a super broken Active Directory because we have this company, we manage their Detroit office, but they have a head-end office in another state with a couple of our small offices. every time we've joined to the domain, like we're supposed to merge them all together, as soon as we give permission to the other guys, all these broken issues fall over there. And we told them they have to rebuild the Active Directory. And they're like, well, we think we can fix it. I said, look, I had a friend who's an expert at this, and he tried to fix it. We've had so many problems with it. We keep having to take them back off because they have a bunch of permission problems. But you're right. AD is just, even the people who claim to be experts and did it for 10 years.
Yeah. And
once
when it gets hosed, it gets hosed.
Yeah. That's the whole problem. There's a Gremlin interactive directory. I should take a screenshot of what it does because no one's ever seen this one before. So when you look at the shares and you're supposed to be able to see all the user shares, instead of showing the user shares, it changes every single one of them to say the word my documents instead of like the /Tom or /whatever share.
Weird.
It changes them right through there. Now we loaded the server clean and works fine. All the shares work fine. You join it to their Active Directory, it breaks them all and changes everything to say my documents.
Wow.
But when you can double click them and you can go in there, and then in the title bar it says my documents. But if you click the title bar, it will actually tell you the name.
Huh.
I've never seen anything like it.
Broken. That is broken.
But it works. And once you figure out which share is which, the problem is there's 30 people that say my documents. So you have to click on each one, figure out the name, or you can just type it in. You can type the UNC path, the share name, and it works. So we have to map all the shares with UNC path and share name. But just to look at it, when you look at the share list on the drives, I'm just like, it's something they did and they don't know what they did.
Yeah. And Corey's probably right. It is probably just a GPO issue of some sort. But like, where? Like, you know what I mean? Like, where do you even start looking? Like, the group policy objects are another, like, within Active Directory, group policy is its own humongous learning curve. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah.
Yeah, and we've gone through, I myself went through them, and the problem is at some point, how much money are they going to spend us figuring it out? Because we know when you load the server clean and set it back up again, it works.
That's a really, really great point that you just made, by the way. And something for, sort of getting back to our original topic of running a business, right? And running an MSP or, servicing customers in any way. There is a very fine balance that you have to kind of learn between, like, the amount of effort it's going to take to fix something versus the amount of money that you're going to bill your client for that same fix, right?
Yeah.
And there is a very, like, good balance in there. Like, I always err on the side of less work or, less money being charged to the client. And I will only proceed cautiously if they keep telling me, like, look, I need this fix. I don't care what it takes, right? That's like, it's an interesting thing to sort of sift through and figure out as you're growing your business.
Yeah, you got to measure it out. We have a retail store as well, and people ask, like, oh, why don't you spend more time fixing some of this? You just choose to reload it. I'm like, comes down to what they want to pay.
Yeah.
If you want to pay for me to figure out how you broke your Windows and me to copy every missing DLL file that you randomly somehow deleted, or do you want me to back up your data, reload Windows, copy your data back, put your pictures back, have a great day?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
Different prices.
Yeah, exactly. and like for me, and I've talked about this on the channel before, like I don't do like desktop PC rebuilds really ever anymore. But when I was doing them, as I was just trying to get any work that I could possibly take, I had a flat rate fee of $250 to rebuild your computer. A lot of people in the comments were saying that's high and you should just fix it. But like the way that I justify that to a customer that I'm going to be rebuilding their computers, like, look, your computer's broken, right? And I could easily spend 2 to 3 hours, which would cover that $250, right? Easily spend that amount of time trying to figure out what's wrong with your computer and still maybe not figure it out. Or figure it out, but then it's like kind of like bending the frame of your car, right? Like, you might be able to get it back and it's going to work, but it's just never going to drive the same again, And so instead, bite the bullet, pay the $250, rebuild it from scratch, and then you don't have to worry about it. Don't spin your wheels for hours and hours and hours. And inevitably, I'm the type of guy that I will get stuck on a problem and spend 5 or 6 hours trying to figure it out, and then only bill the client 2 hours because I don't feel it's fair to them that that I did all this work for my own learning curve.
Yeah, I've done that too. And that is something like, I feel like I should have known this or something. So sometimes I won't bill them for the entirety of the research, unless it's a really special product that, it's a one-off where I had to learn it. There's no reason I should have known this, because we run a couple of those where we've had to help clients with their enterprise application. because the support people were so bad and they're already sunk into the cost of it. So we have to sit down and learn, like, okay, I'm going to figure this thing out for you. I don't usually do Microsoft SQL, but I'll figure out what they broke, and we'll get we had to restore a corrupted data set for a new client that an update broke, and their previous IT guy, and part of the reason the previous IT guy wasn't backing it up. So then we had to sit down and learn, because the company, after they applied the update, broke it. And they're like, oh yeah, what does it? Just restore from backup. We don't have a solution. Right. We're like, well, they don't have backup. Yep. So now let's.
Right. Now we got to get into that solution. Let's revisit that solution thing again.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a good, so just FYI for anyone out there that's watching this and is maybe interested in, doing stuff on the side. The computer rebuilds, like if you start getting a good process for rebuilding PCs for people, it's a really good sort of side business, because you can take someone's computer overnight or over a couple nights and basically just rebuild it, back up all their data. I've done a video on this. Back up all their data, rebuild the computer from scratch, put all the data back on, charge $200 or $250 for that service, and you can do those all day long if you advertise in Craigslist or whatever. It's a good way to make some side income.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone said, how do you deal with people who you're fixing up their mistakes? Yeah, that's kind of a big problem. We always make sure we never ever, and we know there's some terrible IT companies in the area, we make sure we never ever badmouth them, never say anything word about the company.
Yep.
But we'll just say, look, they didn't follow best practice in our opinion. That's all. Then my guys all have that kind of cookie cutter response. Well, were they idiots is always usually what you get. I'm like, they appeared not to have followed best practice, and I would have not have done it that way.
Right.
But my favorite one was, we do a lot of cabling and infrastructure, and you've seen some of my videos on that. The entire rack fell off the wall and ripped down the ceiling tiles. All the servers fell off the wall and everything that were up there. And they're kind of like, I think they're incompetent. I couldn't help it. I'm like, I let their work speak for themselves. That's all I said to them. The client just started laughing because I don't know if I should laugh or cry. I'm like, I don't know. I said, we can fix this.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sure thing, Hugo. Hugo says, thanks for recommending Ninite. I still love Ninite to this day when I rebuild systems. It's a very good way to get all those little, onesie-twosie applications put back onto systems. I think you use Ninite, don't you? Or don't you have, the pro version?
Yeah, well, we're using other tools, but Ninite's great. I highly recommend it. If you don't have something to easily deploy software with, then that's a great tool. We're using Screen Connect, and we use the integrated deployment with their toolbox. So when we have to load software to clients, we're generally using that. And the updates are handled by the SolarWinds tool, so we don't really have to use it for the updating.
So go back to Zach real quick here. Zach's been a follower of the channel for a long time. I started an MSP focused on Windows and SMB officially on March 1st. So first of all, congratulations, Zach. I think that's a wonderful, again, if you can make it work, it's a wonderful career to be in, and it certainly is something that you can provide a lot of value to a lot of people. So can we talk about PSAs, RMMs, endpoint backups, and endpoint security? Well, that's all a lot of different various topics.
And I will tell you, I'm going to see, are you on Facebook? And if you are, there's a group called the IT Business Owners Group that you can find. And I wasn't able to attend it, but a group of MSPs got together, and I believe the video is free. I have to find a link on YouTube for it. But they had an entire video covering all the MSP procedures on there. But it's also that Facebook group is called the IT BOG, ITBOG, is generally a really good group for doing that.
Yeah.
Learning about the whole MSP process.
One thing that I would, I don't know if it's caution or recommend to anyone that's thinking about making the leap into either independent consulting, like more what I do, or MSP business, like more of what Tom does. Be prepared to work harder than you've ever worked in any job that you've ever had. And I'm not kidding about that. I'm talking easily 60 to 80 hours per week that you have to put in, and you kind of have to learn a whole bunch of new skills that you're not even thinking about. Sales and marketing and Google AdSense and accounting, for Christ's sakes, right? Of that those are all very separate learning curves that you're going to have to go through to build the business, and that's why it takes that much dedication. When I started independent, I told my wife straight up, I'm like, listen, this is going to be a lot more hours than you're used to me working, because that's just the way that it's going to go. And I need to put that time and dedication into it to ensure success. If you half-ass it, you're going to get half-ass results.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. Get a good accountant. That's one of those things I may not have ever told you. I was lucky. I had one as a client. We worked out trade, but get a good accountant. That will help you so much.
Yep, I'm actually in that process. I am now on my second accountant that I'm about to fire, and I'm still looking for a third one. And actually, I found that channel that we were talking about earlier. Tom and I were discussing earlier. There's a guy by the name of Tim Schmoyer. He has a series of he has a channel on YouTube dedicated to helping YouTube content creators, boost up their channels and get more subscribers and all that sort of good stuff. Really great content on Tim Schmoyer's channel. He actually just did a video on his accounting firm, which specializes in YouTube content creators. So I'm probably actually just going to give them a call at some point and see if they can help me out. So Christopher Wolf, thank you very much. Appreciate all the content you're both producing. Thank you. Glad you both want to share, give, and want others to succeed rather than just the money and keep info locked away. Well, that's a very good point. Thank you for the super chat, Chris. Much appreciated. That's a really good point. I have always found in my career, not only as my career as an independent consultant and the owner of Crosstalk Solutions, but also when I worked for other people and I was a supervisor or manager or director, right, level, it's always more beneficial to share all of your information and document all of your information than it is to think that holding all of that information close to your chest equals job security. I have never found that to be the case, ever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really big on, I answer pretty much all the questions that people want to know about business and things like that, because I learned from people who took the time to teach me, and I'm like, this is me paying it back. I mean, someone put a video that taught me how to do something, then I took that knowledge and stacked and expanded it. But also the interaction you get with people, because it's all about, oh yeah, if I teach you how to do this part and you learn how to do this part from this person, and then you can consolidate together, and then we all learn from each other, because I go back and we'll watch, oh man, that's cool. And it's kind of a sharing learning ecosystem, and it's a better thing to be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah, the other sort of tenet that I always worked off of when I was hiring people, or in those positions to be able to hire people, is always look to hire people that are smarter than you are.
Yeah, I've never understood people who don't think that. I mean, you find people that can be tasked in certain things and then know certain things, and it doesn't matter. Some people are like, oh, I got to hire a bunch of people that don't know as much, because then they're too smart they might take over my business. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
Business is about creating process and procedures around things and organizing groups of people for a common goal. It's not about who's smart. Matter of fact, if there's something I've learned a lot of, there's some people who are not, I don't want to use the word not smart, but questionable how they run large companies. He's no longer a client of mine. I had too many incidents with him. I watched one of them. He throws things around on the table. He has temper tantrums like a child, screams and throws things. One of them was when I told him he had to buy another license for QuickBooks for his point of sale. Now, this is a guy with about 50 employees, too.
Wow.
He had a temper tantrum in front of me. And when I walked out of the room, I said, you need to grow up. And I just left. I kept my cool. He was losing his mind. The employees were chuckling. I'm like, what? And I go, did you tell Tim it costs money for something? I'm like, yeah. You go, oh, he's in a bad mood today because we had to tell him something else costs money. We had to draw straws. So you caught the tail end of him being angry that stuff costs money. But somehow he runs a big company. I finally got sick of him, and he was just too cheap of a client. Everything was an argument too.
Right.
I told him I didn't have time for him no more.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, that's one of the nice things about owning your own business or being independent, is that you do get to, as much as people need to hire you to do work for them, you get to pick and choose who you potentially want to do business with as well. And so if someone's saying I've fired clients, or William said I've had to fire a few clients, and absolutely I've had to fire clients too, and it hasn't been pretty. I fired this one client that I was doing free PBX work for. They took about 3 months to pay me, including like I had bought them some phones. Like I went out of pocket to get them some phones because they had a pretty good billing history with me. And then the one time they decided not to pay me was when I had gone out of pocket. And it wasn't a ton of money. It was like $800 or something. But still, I paid for that. And now 3 months later, I still haven't been refunded for it. And then they finally paid me up and then immediately wanted me to do more work for them. And I said, listen, no, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? You took so long to pay me back. That's not the type of customer that I want to do business with. And I'm not interested in helping you anymore. It was also at a time that I was out of town, so I couldn't immediately help them anyways. And they got so pissed off. Like about a week later, I received a Better Business Bureau complaint in the mail, talking about how I left them high and dry in the middle of a project. Even though I was an hourly consultant that they were paying hourly, not a project price.
Yeah, and that's always, there's always that trickiness. It comes down to dealing with the humans, as I put it. I had my issues when I worked in corporate because I was the corporate IT director for a big Ford supplier. So I had the issues, but at least it was the same people all the time. Like it was the board members, it was the CEO, it was the heads of different departments that I had to deal with. So you could just figure out their quirks and deal with it. But I never had to deal with any money either. I just kind of made things happen all the time.
Right.
Yeah, dealing with people and just not paying. Every Monday we call is the money chase. I have a guy that's all he does is chase money, and we got one guy who missed a payment, and now we're chasing him. Yeah, it's just we try to get deposits up front. Another comment I'll have on business in general, and this is a mistake a lot of people make, is they try to be the cheapest. They start out with, I'm going to beat everyone's price. That's my business model. I'll do everything you do for cheaper, and you're going to sell yourself short.
Yep.
There's a great article of how I service my customers better by raising the prices. I think that's actually the title of the blog post, but it was a business guy that wrote it. And he says, I found myself trying to undercut everyone, working way too hard and providing low quality service for people. When I raise my prices, I'm actually benefiting my client by providing them better service. And the clients that say, I only want the guy who will do it for half as much, they end up being the most needy people with that you just can't do it. You're like, look, I just can't work for this. I can't get things done for this price.
Right.
You got to find a happy, it's not like overcharge, but you got to charge a reasonable market rate. And, not just because I've been in business a while, but I've always started out my business this way. We charge kind of a lot. People say I'm price shopping. I'm like, oh, I'll save your breath. Just call like this guy or that guy. They're like, what? Like, yeah, if you're just price shopping, I'm not your cheapest.
Right. Well, so, and that's the thing is so for me, the way I look at it is that I want to provide a fair price for the value that I'm providing.
Yeah.
There was a saying that I heard a long time ago as a consultant, you are not paid by the hour, you are paid by the value that you bring to the hour.
And that's a great quote.
Yeah, and that is the way that I look at it, right? And if you are just out there looking for the absolute cheapest, you're right. It's not going to be me. But like on the free PBX side, in the free PBX world, it kind of works out both ways because the price that I charge is probably not the cheapest you could buy a free PBX system for, but the level of effort, the organization, the attention to detail that I put into every single one of my free PBX builds and customizing it for all of the customers, even though the price might be higher than you could get, I still have the advantage in that area that most people are pricing out against ShoreTel or MyTel or these other phone systems where their price is going to be 3 times higher anyways.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So no matter what I charge, it might end up being higher on the competitor's side. So that's a really great business to be in. If anyone's looking for a good niche area where you can provide a lot of value, PBX systems and especially free PBX is a great way to go.
Now, someone said this on here. I seen Zach asked what my hourly rates are. That is a subjective. I don't mind saying them, but I'm just going to qualify it first. Very subjective with where you live. Detroit, the area I'm in, even though Detroit is the Motor City and all the other good and bad you may have heard about Detroit, we are just south of Detroit. That is not the wealth area of Detroit. So our market rate is $120 an hour is what we charge to send our techs out there. But if you put me in California and Silicon Valley, you can't live on making $120 an hour.
Point.
So
Yep.
The tech companies here. So you can't set your prices based on what Tom charges. You have to set the prices on what the market works for in there. It's just like housing. You can buy a nice house here, for maybe $150,000, $200,000 for a 4-bedroom ranch on an acre. That's in the area I'm in. You go out to California, you're like, oh yeah, we can live in a tiny little 2-bedroom house for $400,000.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, pricing really comes with the area. My friend took a huge pay cut to move. He lived in Silicon Valley. And he was from here, moved to Silicon Valley, loved making all the money, but he says, man, I spent it all on everything to try to make a living. He came back here and took a job and took a 20% pay cut, but has more money in his pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a buddy, same thing, lives in the Silicon Valley area. He makes a very good living. He's does database work for, some of the companies out there. And but he lives paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. So your rates are subjective on area. And of course, when you get into, like, I linked to that Facebook group, the IT Business Owners Group, they're international. So there's all kinds of interesting things I didn't know about. I didn't know the housing market and what it costs to live in some of the other European areas. I couldn't believe what these guys were charging for things. But the other factor they have is they pay import on everything they bring into the country. So computers, they're like selling used computers for $500, but there's so much import tax that new computers are thousands.
Yeah. Right.
So everything, I didn't realize there's a global perspective on this, because I'm assuming a lot of the people here were probably from the U.S. We're Americans. We assume that all the time.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
English must be from our place.
Yeah. And I get a lot of, I made the choice kind of early on that I only am going to service U.S. based customers. And, I service all throughout the U.S., right? So I work sort of nationwide. But a lot of people do give me some crap for that decision. But it boils down to two things. And again, it's all just figuring out the market. Number one, I have enough U.S. business that I don't have to go international. And number two, there are considerations for non-payment and your legal choices when you are in the United States versus trying to collect money from someone who's outside of the U.S., right? So those are basically the only reasons why I do it, right?
Yeah.
So, again, it all depends. I'm like you. I'm $120 an hour. So that's basically that has worked for me. I started out at $100 an hour, and I was getting so much work that I had to sort of start actually filtering some people out. So I bumped myself to 120, and that actually didn't seem to slow down the work at all. So I'm not going to go any higher than that, but that works for me.
Yeah, like I said, it's like it changes, and that rates work good for us. We're making money, and I can pay my employees a good wage, which is important.
Yeah,
because employees are expensive.
Yeah, well, not only that, but even as an independent consultant, like when I had no employees, right? You got to imagine that $120 for an hour's worth of work is not just that single hour's worth of work. Right? There's time that went in up front to source your clients. In my case, it was, creating YouTube videos and putting that content out there to have people, watch and then, eventually hire me. And then there's time on the backside to manage the accounting, manage the billing, manage your customer records, manage the time, the calendar, there's a lot of time that goes into 1 hour of paid work. That's much more than actually 1 hour.
Yeah, there's all the costs it took to acquire a client. That is just, cost of client acquisition. It's a hard thing to calculate too. It's easier now, so to speak, as my company's bigger and we have so many clients. There's a ton of referral work going towards us.
Sure.
But there's still so much that goes into it, like how we got all these clients, and getting established was really hard. I mean, I was starving for a long time, years before I ever really made a profit. I leveraged and financed every dollar I had. I didn't have. I did not come from any money. So.
Well, and that's what I recommend to people that are looking to get into this business, right? Especially if you're making the leap from one side to the other, is cut your expenses down as much as humanly possible. And I don't expect to make any money for 1 year, is what I say. So basically, if you are starting this business, you should have saved up potentially 1 full year worth of expenses. Or your living wage or whatever before you get started, and that's a pretty tall order. So that's why it's good to have, like as we were talking about earlier, some clientele on the side that you could sort of take with you, and help boost you right off the bat as you move forward.
Yeah. So, and I want to say this too, because I do a lot of public speaking. I've talked on entrepreneur panels, and I have some groups I hang out with. One of the things that we've reminded people when they come to these panels and talk, we do them at some of these open networking places we have in Detroit. And we'll tell them, look, you don't want to start a business because you hate your boss. That's not a business plan. I don't like where I work, and he's charging $120 an hour, and he doesn't pay me $120 an hour. So I'm just going to go take his job, and I'm going to make the $120 an hour. I hate my boss is not a business plan. I think we did a talk titled that.
That's funny. Well, and that's true. I mean, that's absolutely true. I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
I mean,
because it will leave you ill prepared for what it takes to start a business. We're not saying you shouldn't start a business, but your only plan shouldn't be, well, I hate my boss and I know how much he charges when he bills me out, therefore I will cut him out. Yeah. It just doesn't. There's so much more that goes into it.
Well, and it's funny because like the type of person that I am is if I wasn't doing tech stuff for a living, I would probably still be playing with all this tech stuff on the side anyways, because I love it. You know what I mean? Like I love digging in and figuring out new hardware or, new technologies. And that's also, to me, when I was hiring, that was one of the most important criteria for me was I want to find the people that like when they come across a problem, they don't stop thinking about that problem until it's fixed or figured out. Right? Like that's the type of people that I like to hire. Even if they're not as great on the technical side, if they have that capability where they're not just like clock out at 5 p.m. and turn their mind off and I'll just worry about it tomorrow type of thing, like that, those are the best people to hire.
Yeah. I've heard it phrased similar to this, but my kind of putting for that would be I look for people who are really focused on the acquisition of knowledge. Some people are really into, and the best way to describe it is like the validation of institution. They're looking to just get a degree. They're looking to get a bunch of certifications. Yeah. Are you passionate about it? Is the certification to get you a job? Or you're going, I hear if I get these certs, I can get paid like $200,000 a year, $100,000 a year because I'm certified, right?
Right.
Are you passionate about technology? That's what I care about. One of my other hires, we started talking because his phone was rooted and I seen the app he had on there. We were just talking about it and it turned into a deep technical discussion about what it took to root his phone. I'm like, there's my guy. Yeah. You're hired.
No, that's a good point.
You have a passion for technology. I have a little side gig I do some consulting as well. I help build a tech department at a school and staff it because the school got really big. They're one of our clients, and we needed some more intelligent, more knowledgeable people inside the school. So we helped them build their tech department and do the advisory on that. And that's what it was. Is I would determine whether or not they had a passion for technology, what their, so to speak, what's your extracurricular activities. And you can tell the guys who are like 9 to 5, it's a job. I make sure all the users have their degree set versus them like, oh yeah, I did this. Here's my other thing I did here. Another guy does a podcast on technology, it turned out. And I'm like, he ended up being one of the guys I hired. I mean, the guy is just 24/7 deep dive into it.
Yeah. And this is funny. People are chiming in about how they don't have certs. And like, I've actually on many, well, I won't say on many occasions, but I've considered a video called Certifications Are Bullshit.
Yeah.
For my channel, but I know that's just going to cause a lot of controversy, so I've never ultimately done it. But it's kind of one of the things that I feel, especially certifications from a specific vendor, where it seems like it's just a cash grab for you to go spend a week at their location learning about their product, and then you get certified on their product. Now, that's not to say that all certifications are bullshit. Like some of the higher level Cisco certifications, that you have to know your stuff, or else, you're not going to even come close to passing that certification. But like when I worked for a voice over IP company for 7 years, I was the guy who came up with the certification course and taught it, right? So I guess I'm certified there. So I have one certification because I'm the one who created the course. So I think
you made the certification.
I think I by default get that one, but I don't have any other certs. And my idea, tell me what you guys think about this idea. My idea for the Certifications Are Bullshit video was that I was going to take the Network Plus practice exam cold. No studying whatsoever to see if I could pass it. Because if I do pass it, then it means like, okay, well, hey, maybe certifications, I mean, I've gotten this far in my life without having it. And if I don't pass the certification, then we know it's bullshit because it's asking you a bunch of questions that don't apply to someone who's had a successful career in computer networking. Right, so it can go either way, I guess.
Yeah, well, and part of it too, they do ask a lot of irrelevant questions. I mean, I understand when you have in dealing with a mass hiring, you sometimes you want certifications on there because you just want to filter out the candidates because you put a now hiring and 400 people say, I know tech stuff and apply. And you're like, I have to sort out all these resumes into some, organized thing. The other thing too, though, is I qualify certifications or BS because someone called me out when I was ranting about it one time at one of these talks and go, what? So you don't want a doctor? And I'm like, huh? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I do want to see doctor.
Yeah, qualify it.
School,
IT
qualifiers before I go into surgery.
Right.
Not like, hey, man, I've been cutting on people for years. You're going to be fine.
I learned through trial and error.
Yeah, I think that works because it's in tech maybe is a little bit life and death, but I don't think we have a robust certification process because you can't apply the fundamentals that build doctors into what builds technicians. It's very different. We're in a very fast moving pace. Humans don't evolve quite as fast. We have 4 arms and legs, and right. Medical knowledge is moving forward faster, but the process and organization to it, there's places where that works, but in the text things, man, the stuff's obsolete by the time you print it on paper.
Yeah. I mean, when I was, going through college, I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. When I was in school, I was there for computer science. I was there for programming, basically, because they didn't have, when I was in college, networking courses. They didn't have like computer hardware, courses that you could take. Now they do. But back in, 1995, there was no such thing. You went into computer science and that was it. And I found very quickly that I am not a computer programmer. That was what my experience in college taught me is don't go into computer programming because you're not the right type of person for it.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things. Like I didn't even go to college. I got right out of high school and just started doing this. That's been, besides delivering pizzas and while I was in high school working at a car wash, and we didn't have really computer classes. So even in high school, I took machine, tool, and die and their kind of computer class. I still have some Turbo Pascal in my head somewhere.
It's in there, yeah. I'll tell you,
that was my 1992 programming class.
When I go through and look to hire people, right, I first of all, of course, sort through the resumes. When I filter out the resumes of people that I actually want to talk to, I have a process for figuring out if they are going to work. My interviews are either 10 minutes long or 1 hour long.
Yeah.
Right. And if you go the full hour, it means I'm really interested. Right. But I always do interviews the same way. I start off with some light banter, kind of make the interviewee comfortable because it's a tough thing to be interviewed for a job position. It makes people nervous and all that. And so you want to try to make them comfortable as possible. So I spend a few minutes talking about them and like what they, stuff that's not related to whatever I'm about to interview them on. And then I always say, okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions about IT. Just give me the best answer. It's okay to say I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And then I will ask them a series of progressively more difficult questions about IT until they kind of start to stumble. And it starts off with things like, what is DNS? What is DHCP? What is SIP, right? So those are very, very basic things. I've had people that have come in that have MCSE on their resume that can't answer the question, what is DNS? Right? And that's immediately, like within like 10 minutes, I'll be like, okay, well, hey, thank you for calling and blah, 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 click. Because like if you like if you're a paper MCSE, as they say, those are not difficult concepts in networking. So if you don't know those concepts, you should have no reason to be applying for this position.
Yeah, it's my friend. He applied both at Google and the Linux Foundation. He ended up working for the Linux Foundation, but he was just going through the questioning and everything that they go through. And they want essay-style responses for problem solution to apply.
Wow.
It's really interesting what they want. And you have to give them details because he works in development and operations and he's not a programmer. He makes sure all the systems for critical infrastructure at the Linux Foundation works. That would be kind of briefly way to describe his job. It's kind of important.
Yeah.
anyways, because of all the stuff that he does, they wanted, like, you have to outline the problem and do a debrief on a problem you solved in detail. Like, we need to know specifically, libraries you changed out on live running servers, how long it took, downtime. And he had to write a series of different essays on that. And that was part of the hiring process.
Yeah.
But if you want to work for some of the top places like that, Google, that's what they go through.
Sure.
They don't just ask you, they really do a deep dive. But I think that's important. Now, you got to really ask the technician some of that really deep stuff.
Yeah. Well, and for a company, especially a company like Google, I mean, they have such name recognition that they can be that picky. I mean, they have no shortage of candidates. Ron here says, interviews are not always a good way to see who is a real worker on the job. That is a very, very good point. I've seen workers, I've seen talkers. There's a big difference. So that is a very good point. The interview process is basically to filter out people to make your best guess as to who's going to be a good candidate for the position. But you're right. You don't really know for sure, number one, how they fit into the culture of your company and your department. And number two, what their actual work ethic is until you actually start working with them. I had a guy once, this was unbelievable to me. I hired him. He passed all of the stuff with flying colors. I hired him, and I hired him the week of Christmas. And so he started on Monday, and I think it was like, if I remember correctly, it was Christmas Eve was Wednesday, and then Christmas, of course, we had off was Thursday, and then like there was one day that we were all back in on Friday. And he worked 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, and then didn't show up Christmas Eve. And now, even though that was a day where like you're supposed to show up and work, I would always let everyone off at about 11 a.m., right? I mean, it was like, nothing's happening. You can go home at 11 a.m. But the third day on the job, he was a no-show to the department. Like, he just didn't show up that day. And I was like, where is he? I tried calling him, no pickup. And then, like, after he got back after the holiday, he was like, oh, I just thought we had that day off. And so I immediately let him go, because I was like,
yeah,
even if I didn't tell you that Christmas is off, you should have come in that day. You know what I mean? Like, just terrible. Like, that's a very bad indicator of a bad work ethic. Like, immediately.
It really is. Well, it is 3:30, so I'm gonna have to jump out of here pretty soon.
All right, Tom. Well, any last questions for Tom before we get going? What's your drop deadline here?
Oh, I by 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
I got a little bit of time. I just want to queue it up. Well, there's actually going to be a Zumba class that way, right next door.
Oh.
And well, they get a little bit louder.
I can imagine,
because they happen to have the speaker right up against the wall.
Oh, funny.
And, yeah, I asked her what time they were starting today. Normally, they don't start till later, but on Fridays she has an earlier class sometimes. So.
Yeah. All right, well, we can wrap it up. Certainly, listen, this has been very fun for me and certainly very beneficial. I'm going to definitely get into that Freenas build. I'm going to put together a good parts list and then get everything ordered and build it up on the channel, I think. So
yeah, and of course, shoot me an email if you have any questions on it or whatever, but I think you can get it. But yeah, once you pick a motherboard, and I can even send you the links to the exact one I use, or if you look at my video, I have links to the ones all the parts I used in it.
Absolutely. No, for sure.
Oh, it's 2030 in the UK, so
that's like, it's
yeah, it's almost what do we got here? Still. 1330 years.
Well, let's see, it's 12:37 my time. I'm probably going to come back on, just for anyone who's interested. I'm going to come back on and do a little bit of Friday gaming on the Crosstalk Solutions gaming channel. I will probably do that at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So just look up Crosstalk Gaming, and you will find me. I will be live streaming again a little bit later today. We are going to be playing some PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. So if anyone is interested in that, and yes, Corey, it will be beer time. I probably will have a beer while I do that.
And when you're doing that, I will be having a beer right down the street, because I have a bunch of friends I'm meeting for a beer like 7 p.m. my time, which is 2 p.m. your time.
Oh, there you go. All right. Belgium. God, it's always astounding to me where people are watching this from.
Oh, now, this is what's weird. My podcast, we use, it's called Blueberry. It's a statistics aggregator. I think we're only 60% US, and we're getting as many as 10,000 downloads an episode. We're just like, where are all these people? They're coming from all over the place. We learned a lot of them are using VPNs from Europe, so we don't know exactly what our stats are because we were re-looking up where some of the traffic was coming from, but it's still pretty cool.
Funny. Look at that.
Oh.
Denmark, Italy, Portugal, Southgate, UK.
Southgate is my employee in the other room. So.
Oh yeah, Marvin. Hey, Marvin.
Marvin, who you may have seen from the channel.
Yeah. Oh, Jamaica. Look at that. South America. Holy moly, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. And of course, Tom, thank you very much for joining as well and spending your time with us. If you guys liked this, make sure you give us a thumbs up. If you want to see Tom on the channel again, absolutely let me know. And of course, if you are not subscribed to Lawrence Systems on YouTube, go ahead and get subscribed. He is a wealth of knowledge in terms of the content that he does videos on, a lot of open source stuff and general business stuff, as well as I know you've done videos on like your entire like editing setup and flow and stuff. So all sorts of different videos, that
randomness and everything.
Yeah, and Marvin's on there too. You'll see Marvin on the channel as well. And fun too. Yes, Marvin. Yes, Marvin. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. We're going to end it here, and I'm going to try to do live streams more often. By the way, for anyone wondering, I'm going to try to do live streams every other Friday, but I'll probably skip a week and a half, 2 weeks from now because I'm going to be on vacation. But after that, I will be trying to do live streams every other Friday.
Live stream your vacation. Your wife will be thrilled, right? Hold on, honey.
I am not a vlogging channel.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And my wife has, believe me, she has zero interest in being on YouTube. Oh, Rich, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Oh my gosh, look at that. $50 super chat from Delano Hornbuckle. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Appreciated. That will go. That's a couple cases of beer right there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
I can buy my bullet rye with that.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again, and we will see you in the next one. Keep watching the channels.
All right. Thanks.
Yep. Bye.